Why aren't you a rockstar delegator? If you've ever said, it's just easier if I do it myself, you're not alone. Few pastors struggle with working hard. I interview pastors frequently, and what I find that they struggle with is delegating well. But what if the reason your ministry isn't growing the way you'd hoped is not a lack of effort, but a lack of empowered leaders? I'm John Wilson, the author of the Nehemiah Way. Today, we're going to talk about one of the biggest bottlenecks in ministry growth, delegation. I'll walk through 5 game-changing delegation techniques that you can start to use today. Stick around because I'll give you the #1 secret to increasing the capacity and reach of your ministry. Let's get into it. First, let's talk about why delegation sometimes feels really risky. Probably the biggest thing I hear about delegation, and this isn't just from pastors, this is business leaders, this is really any leader that struggles with delegation, it's that fear of losing control. So particularly for those of us that are really particular about not just how things are finished, but how they're done and how they're delivered and all those different kinds of things. It can be really scary to hand it off to someone else and know that it's probably not going to be the way that you would do it. So one of the other things that comes up a lot, and I find even for myself, is just past experience. When you see a ball gets dropped or there's a handoff problem or something just doesn't get finished on time, that can really make anyone gun shy about handing work off to someone else. The other thing, there's kind of a mindset of just, I can do it faster or better myself. And usually that's true. So often we've gotten so good at doing different tasks, and we've gotten to the point where we have them just the way we want them, and handing them off to someone else can seem really scary. It also can just seem like it's going to take more time or as much time to hand it off. And then I'm going to have to go back and fix things that aren't right. And so therefore it doesn't seem like something that makes sense. So delegation kind of seems like a waste of time. Like, why not just do it myself? Finally, delegation can feel a bit like a gamble. You just don't know how it's going to come out, and you may actually end up losing in the proposition because either the quality of the work isn't good, or you have to go back and do it all over again. And in a ministry situation, that can cost time that's really valuable, or it can just mean that different objectives or goals of the ministry go undone. However, all that said, failing to delegate can be a guaranteed path to burnout, and that's why it's so important to delegate well. Recognizing that delegation may take more time, and it may be that the quality isn't quite as good as if you did it yourself, but knowing that it gives you the opportunity to focus on things that are more important and to really zoom in on what God's calling you to do rather than busy work, this is where it can really be a game changer in your ministry, particularly when it comes to your own stress level, when you can have confidence that some things are being taken care of while you're focusing in on things that you're uniquely situated to do. Nehemiah got delegation right. And that's one of the reasons I spend so much time talking about delegation, is that when you look at the book of Nehemiah, it's almost a guidebook, a handbook on how to effectively delegate work. He built teams. And not solo heroes. He actually found champions that were surrounded by other people. And then he activated these champions to lead the people that are already naturally following them. Particularly if you get into Nehemiah 3, you see lots of examples of this. He also assigned work by household and by location. This was a way that he connected people with the work by assigning work that was right near their home, right near their family, and really was close in proximity. So logistically, it was easier. In this way, people were able to work on what was closest to them. And that can apply just as easily today. He trusted both skilled and unknown leaders. He identified individuals that had leadership skills that were already leading people in a particular context, even if it was just leading their family well. And he trusted them with the work once he had a chance to show them what was needed, how it needed to be done, the skills that were needed, the approach that they were going to take, and really help them to understand the big picture, even if he didn't have a lot of direct familiarity with these individuals. It's also important to note, not everyone, including Nehemiah, was famous. In fact, they were all very ordinary people, but they were faithful, they were doing the work that was assigned to them, and they were committed to it. And this is where Nehemiah as a story is so interesting, because it's not a story about a highly dynamic person that's in a very powerful position. Nehemiah was very ordinary. He was a very ordinary, common person. He was called by God and he was equipped by God, and he faithfully answered that call. Another way Nehemiah demonstrated effective delegation was giving people ownership. He identified champions and he entrusted them to do the work. He didn't really try to do their work for them or to look over their shoulder the whole time. He just set clear expectations and guidelines and the outcomes that he was looking for, and he turned them loose to get the work done. And finally, he made it really clear that he wasn't asking people to serve his vision. This was God's calling. And in doing that, he helped the people see where they connected to that calling, and it became their vision as well. Not just Nehemiah's, not just them or their family or their coworkers, but recognizing this is part of something big that God was doing for the kingdom. Now I'll walk through 5 tips to become a rockstar delegator. Here's number 1. Segment the work clearly. Don't delegate tasks. Delegate responsibility zones. So really identify what is the outcome you're trying to achieve. What does it need to look like in terms of formatting? What's the context and background that someone needs to really understand to be able to do the work effectively? And then really walk them through what it is that you're looking for. You can use the Nehemiah 3 model in this way to say, this person is in charge of this section of wall or this gate. And so this is where Nehemiah made it really clear what the expectation was for each champion, for each group of volunteers as they were working on the wall. Rockstar Delegator tip number 2, select leaders, not helpers. So choose people that have influence already, not just those that are available. This can be really helpful when you start to look at who already has people surrounding them where they have influence, where you can make that one call to this person, to this champion, and they'll rally the rest of the group around them. In this way, you're giving ownership not only to the task or the outcome, but even figuring out what needs to be done, why, and how. And by doing this, you're going to have a much more engaged volunteer leader, and those that follow them are going to have a much clearer connection to what's happening. So looking for those natural champions who others already follow is half the battle, because by doing this, you're not just bringing on people that are there ready to listen to what you tell them to do. You're bringing individuals who can bring their own creativity, gifts, and abilities to the table to figure out, here's the problem, here are some ways that we could address it, here's the one that seems to fit best, and to really get everyone into motion. Rockstar Delegation tip number 3 comes right from the book of Nehemiah. Nehemiah had a very specific playbook for everything that he did. Anytime he got new information or encountered a situation that needed his attention, he would pray, then he would plan, then he would prepare. So you see him pray and then act over and over again. Nehemiah did not wing it. He had a strategy. He would prepare people before there was a handoff. He set clear expectations, and he made sure everything was in place for a champion to take point and for others to rally around that champion and get the work done. Rockstar Delegation tip number 4, create circles, not silos. Encourage leaders to build teams around themselves. If you've identified those that already have a team, you're really helping them to give that team context for the work that needs to be done in the church. But asking someone to do something once means that that job was completed, but it may not mean that anything further happens beyond that or that there's any follow-up. Therefore, creating this serving circle with an individual that has an objective that goes beyond just a task, but to a larger objective or goal, that's going to really give the opportunity for that group to bond together and to rally together to get the work done. And with that, that champion is going to be teaching others how to do the work, what the outcomes need to look like, and even how to plan or think about doing this type of work. And that actually can become part of your succession plan, because those individuals might be the ones that later step in and take over when that leader is moving on to other things. And so in that way, you're preparing the next generation of leaders at the same time. Rockstar Delegation tip number 5. Stay in the work as a visionary. So this is where Nehemiah had a fastball at being a visionary and being someone who organized things at a very high level, at a strategic level. But at the same time, he was not afraid to get into the work. At times, he was shaking his robe out to show all the dust that was there, because he was building the wall. At the same time, he was looking at the big picture and doing the work. So he was always staying connected to the vision and the work itself. And he was encouraging others. He was inspecting the work. He was celebrating wins. He was doing things to make sure that that vision and strategy he established was not getting removed from the work that was actually being done. And so as a visionary leader, it's staying close enough to be able to make sure that the vision is being realized and the work being done is contributing to that vision. It's probably also worth noting here that as a visionary, as a strategist, as someone who's managing at a higher level, there are times when it's appropriate not to do the individual task work, but to stay removed from that and to do the things that are really high value in terms of refining that vision and clarifying the strategy and the implementation plan for how it's going to go into place. And you saw that happening with Nehemiah. At times he was working on the wall, at times he was working to develop the whole project. And he was always looking ahead to what was next because he wasn't just building a wall. As I like to say, it's not about the wall. That was just a starting point. He was rebuilding the city. He was rebuilding the nation. He was rebuilding and re-implementing the law that was going to help people understand their sin and their need for a savior. So in these ways, Nehemiah was staying connected to the work, but also staying in place as the visionary and looking ahead to what was coming next. So there are 5 Rockstar Delegation tips, and now I want to share a secret to expanding the capacity of your ministry. And it's going to seem really obvious when I say it. Invite more people to step into leadership within your church. Those members that are part of your church on Sunday morning, but aren't really that involved otherwise. Sometimes we call them pew potatoes. Those individuals that are in the pews, they're very talented. They're wonderful people. They have skills and gifts and abilities that often aren't being utilized because they aren't being invited to participate. By inviting these individuals into leadership roles, you're inviting them to become mission mobilizers. And so by just asking the question, you have the opportunity to expand your capacity. I recently talked with a pastor who shared they had 5 or 6 different ministry ideas that they felt like God was placing on their heart, but they didn't have any capacity or leadership in place that could move these forward. And so they invited individuals in that they knew had a lot of leadership potential, that were mature in their faith, but weren't heavily involved, and just laid them out. Like, we think these are all really valuable, but we don't have the capacity. What do you think? And not only did they get lots of great input, there were a number of people that stepped up to volunteer to lead some of these initiatives. And almost overnight, the ministry capacity was significantly increased. You don't need to carry the weight of ministry alone. When you delegate well, you don't lose control, you multiply impact. If you found this video helpful, please like, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the Nehemiah Way YouTube channel. Also, down below, you'll find a link to some free resources to help you mobilize a church full of leaders. Please leave comments or questions below, and I'll try to respond to these. Until next time, lead well and mobilize a church full of leaders.